Like yourself.
Yeah, more than 80% enlisted.
Right.
You know, that point is totally misunderstood. There was a time in 1964, in 1965, 1966, and 1967, where every evening we had Walter Cronkite on CBS Network News extolling the virtues of our fleet in the Pacific and our presence in Vietnam. We had Lyndon Johnson saying, hey, we're just about there. We had your Robert McNamara's. We had your General Westmoreland's. America supported our involvement. But everybody only remembers when the Tet Offensive came in '68 and, wait a minute, how come the Vietnamese are able to come into the U.S. Embassy in Saigon when the American casualties were continuing to increase? That America lost favor with its involvement in Vietnam. So we only remember 68, 69, 70, and then we really started to extract ourselves after that. But they forget that for all of those years, it was rah-rah America, rah-rah involvement, and we, accordingly, those of us who came of age in that period of time, went as we felt our obligation as a citizen in this country required. Of course, now that history has had some time to come by, that's all changed.
When GIs came back from World War II, they had the GI Bill, which was almost revolutionary. It gave them special privileges in housing, health, and all kinds of things. Now, why haven't the Vietnam veterans have something like that?
It's a lot of things, but I'll try and reduce it to its essence. Number one, we did not have a willing base of support to meet our needs, okay? We had spent, I think, $165 billion in pursuing our war in Vietnam. Guys come back like myself, and I required a lot of medical care in the hospitals, a lot of acute medical care. Neurosurgeons were involved, therapists were involved, I needed equipment, I needed a lot of things. The hospitals in this country for the veterans had long ago stopped being hospitals for what we came back from Vietnam with in the way of medical needs, acute medical care. The hospitals are populated now by veterans of the First World War and the Second World War. They have become glorified nursing homes. But beyond direct medical care, the GI Bill, the education program that was afforded the veterans of the Second World War, was very reluctantly brought back by Lyndon Johnson. He said in 1966 that he was going to veto the bringing back of the GI Bill for the Vietnam veteran because it cost. And the way they did it was, back in Korea, the GIs were getting $110 a month back in 1955 when they stopped with the Korean veteran. They brought it back in 1966 for the Vietnam veteran at $10 less, a flat $100 a month.
That's all, $100 a month.
$100 a month, even though a decade earlier it had been $110 for the Korean War veteran. They couldn't afford it. We had spent a lot of money in fighting the Vietnam War. When we used to petition for health care, for the GI Bill, for employment programs, they would cry poverty. They'd say it was fiscally irresponsible. In 1972, when Nixon vetoed the Veterans Medical Care Expansion Act, he said, I am vetoing this bill because it is fiscally irresponsible and inflationary. All right? Now, can you imagine what that does to a guy like me? I was a Marine infantry officer. I had the battleship New Jersey fire in support of me once when I went into the DMZ. I had jet strikes, one after the other. I had an hour and a half of heavy artillery, many, many times. It was routine for me to spend $100,000 a day to kill people. Then I get shot in the process, come back home, and my government tells me that it's fiscally irresponsible and inflationary to provide adequate medical care in the hospital, to get a GI Bill that's anywhere near what was given to veterans of the Second World War, or even Korea for that matter, that we can't get an employment program so that we can be on parity with those of our generation that didn't stop their life to take 2 or 3 or 4 years into the military. You always hear before the Congress, a veteran is a veteran is a veteran. The bullets were the same on Tinian or in Europe as they were in Saigon or the DMZ. Nobody's arguing that a bullet isn't going to kill you just as dead in the Second World War as it did in Vietnam, but what we're saying is all that goes around the fighting, all right, that which you've got to look to justify it, to understand it, to be able to live with it, It's not there for the Vietnam veteran. And that's why a veteran is not a veteran is not a veteran. It's a different experience. We're just not there.
When I got out of the service, I was 20.
Yeah.
And I had a big old fat old doctor sit there and tell me it's nowhere in the world that someone 20 years old could be disabled.
But how does he work that logic out if you just spent 2 years in Vietnam?
I don't know, but this is what was told to me.
You ended up. Let me just jump ahead there. What compensation? What is the total compensation that you now have for all your injuries?
I get $48 a month for my injuries.
I'll just put that into sterling. $48 a month, about 20 pounds a month you get. That's nothing.
Right.
Peanuts.
No, nothing at all. And I just got that in the last 2 years.
You've only had that for 2 years, and you left Vietnam 14 years ago.
Yes. Yes.
What happened to the other 12 years? You've had nothing?
I've been fighting for compensation all that time. The Veterans Administration isn't for the veteran. It's not for the veteran, it's for the system. And they give us nothing at all. All Vietnam veterans have been shafted. You know, we've been screwed well, and we'll continue to be screwed.
Regardless of whether they're black or white?
Regardless if they're black or white or Chicanos, because there was a lot of Chicanos there too. A lot of minorities were there, and we're all being had.
They had no real programs for the drug-addicted or drug-abusing veteran coming back from Vietnam. Their whole idea for the drug-addicted veteran was to get him some tranquilizers, put him on a 21-day lockup or detoxification, and put him back in the street. And that was fine, that it helped you clean up a little bit and get your health back together again, but there was no counseling. There was nothing at all in that. You know, it was just a period to come in and try and regroup and then go back and start all over again.
You were wounded, weren't you?
Yeah, it was during the Tet Offensive 1968, and I got hit in the back and through the arm.
I started working on the statue about 2.5 years ago, and I was asked to build it, and it was to make the statue of it. It took 2 years, and out of the 2 years, literally about 13 months of the 2 years, I'd worked night and day on it, which was driving my wife nuts.
This 7-foot sculpture is Mike Solsona's gift to the memory of his comrades. Mike lost both legs and has received no compensation for a lame hand and deafness. He uses his artificial legs often just to conceal the fact that he fought in Vietnam, and he walks with pain. The funny, bitter story which Mike and his wife Beryl tell about his battle to park his car says much about an attitude which all the veterans have to face.
How many parking tickets have you had?
Well,
how many does this represent?
$7,000.
7,000 parking tickets. $7,000
worth of parking tickets.
When did you begin this
as soon as I got home. As soon as I got home, as soon as I had to drive,
Yeah. So what would happen? You would get a parking ticket, refuse to pay it,
or not even bother sending it in.
Yeah.
And then I'd go down the next year when I had to register the car.
Yeah.
And I'd tell them I'm missing both legs, blah, 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 this and that, and do a little double talking, and then they'd give me my registration.
Yeah.
So after about 9 years, the tickets just kept on building up and building up and building up until last year when we went in, you know, we gave them the plate number, it went in the computer and came out. People, you know, you gotta be crazy, you know? You wanna register your car, you owe us, you know, the parking tickets are worth more than the car.
Yeah.
So we went back and forth, trying to negotiate for about an hour, and then they said, well, look, just get out of here. We don't need you. We're trying to help people over here. Just get out of here. So I says, my car's not registered, and I'm missing both legs. Don't you understand? And they just kept on going, and so I took my legs off, and it was at a desk like this. I took them off,
It's the judge's chambers.